Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how to be with somebody who's a dismissive avoidant attachment style. And this is a channel where we essentially bring you personal development tools and tips for your subconscious mind. So I want to start a little bit by talking about what you need to know if you're in a relationship with somebody who's dismissive avoidant. Number one, and the reason we're going through this actually, the what you need to know part is that these are the things that will help you to see the truth behind the actions you're judging. So it's so easy to take something at face value. Let's say you see your dismissive partner as being cold, or they sort of cut you off, or they're short. It's so easy to judge that and be like, oh, they're being unkind or uncaring, or I don't matter to them, or to make our own interpretations and sort of stamp those judgments onto that person without understanding the deeper roots. So what you need to know and what this section's about is about what those deeper roots are, so you can see them in the context of truth instead of through the filter of your interpretations based on some of the wounds that you might have through your attachment style or through your childhood and upbringing, just as sort of the natural programs we acquire through life. So number one, you want to know that the dismissiveness in this person and the avoidance style in this person is because as a child they had a consistent amount of not having their needs met. Okay, so in really early developmental stages, really early, this young individual consistently did not have their needs met, either physically, emotionally, or both. And so what happens through this is this dismissive avoidant attachment style individual learns to adapt to their environment by not relying on other people to meet their needs, because there wasn't any sign or validity in the reasoning that they should. So what they learned out of this is basically to assume a state of rejection from other people. They have basically adopted this assumed state that they will be rejected physically and or emotionally. And so their coldness is often, or their dismissiveness is often, not just the way that they have learned to treat themselves intrinsically that they then bring forward into the world, but this assumed state of, well, I don't want to get too close to you because you're going to hurt me because that's what I know. And so that dismissiveness, so that's, we can make harsh judgments and interpretations about that. Just that characteristic is basically a coping mechanism that was developed as a result of fear and hurt. And so it doesn't mean we sit here and justify it and say, oh, great, then I just put up with it. It just means that you see it differently so that you can communicate from a gentle and vulnerable space instead of from a personalized space. And this is a really important point if you're going to be working through this relationship. The next part is the coldness. Sometimes that coldness that you see, the coldness is how a dismissive avoidant person copes when they feel imbalanced. They withdraw into themselves. This was the only coping mechanism that was, consistently available to them, was to withdraw into themselves when they couldn't rely on, count on, connect to, derive the emotional support or the emotional needs they had from other people. So they learn to rely on themselves. And so this also creates this assumed perception that everybody is relying on themselves, and they naturally see things through that filter of reality. So whereas you might take an anxious attachment style person who almost like self-sacrifices and gives and overgives and expects that they'll receive in return, and that relationships are about just over giving and over receiving, and that we sort of give everything to the other and vice versa. And there are relationship styles like this between two anxious attachment style partners that can work. But generally, that really just leads to a state of codependency in relationships. And there can be a lot more challenges through that. Ideally, you want to have this capacity to be rooted in yourself and keep your sense of identity and be able to meet your own needs when somebody's not available, without making the assumption that they always should be available, and give and also receive. Like, you want to have both places maximized when you're in a relationship: the ability and clarity to understand your own emotions, process your own emotions, meet your own needs, and the ability to express your needs so clearly and authentically, and express your emotional state to the person that you're with. You want both. If you get too polarized in one direction or the other, you set the tone or context for a relationship to become quite unhealthy. So, and it's not to say that some of these unhealthy relationships don't have patterns that can sometimes sort of see through the years and can be workable. It's just that that's not the ideal space, because there's usually a trade-off somewhere, whether it's in relationship to self or whether it's in relationship to other, because we have, people who are too distant, can go either way. So, um, generally, dismissive avoidant people also, in sort of under this what you need to know umbrella, um, they have learned that their emotions really didn't get them anything, because when they express emotions, there was consistent rejection. So they sort of view emotions, at least sort of stored in their nervous system, as weakness. Like their emotions are almost a threat to themselves, and so they can be quite emotionally repressed in this area, and sort of detached from their emotions, to varying degrees, but almost to degrees of severity a little bit. And they also see closeness as a threat. Their nervous system responds to too much emotional connection or bonding as being a threat, unless, of course, this is something that is created slowly, consistently, and over time. And that can facilitate change. But too much closeness too soon, this person gets overwhelmed, their nervous system gets overwhelmed, because closeness for them, remember, in some of their earliest subconsciously programmed perceptions, closeness for them meant pain. Closeness for them meant, stress and hurt and all these different things. So they actually are still sort of reliving these patterns. They see reality through that filter of those early patterns, if that makes sense. Um, and again, they keep this assumed perception that everybody's out for their own needs, because that's what they saw. That's the upbringing they had, and they learned to cope by taking care of themselves, more or less, physically and emotionally. Now, this won't be to the degree that they did everything for themselves, but there was enough consistency that tremendously outweighed the consistency of emotional needs and or physical needs being met, that they assume that, okay, everybody's kind of out for themselves. And so they have this sort of tendency to almost want to hoard their resources, because they feel like, I can't go to anybody, I can't rely on anybody, I don't have anybody to fall back on. That's sort of this assumed message that they received. And so they can be protective at first, with money. They can be a bit taking, because it's sort of, they're almost operating a bit from the survival oriented mentality, and at least their nervous system is. So when we judge, oh, selfish and takers and all these different things, understand the roots, so that you can communicate from a different space, so that you can move from a different space in this relationship. So those are some really key points you need to know. Now, here's what I found through working with many clients over time, and really seeing these patterns and noticing these patterns. And there will be more things to add, but here are some really consistent pieces that you'll see. Generally, the core triggers for a dismissive avoidant person is that they struggle so much with criticism. Shame is really painful. Any criticizing, they take a shame. And the reason is because when this child is a young child developing and their needs aren't being met, they can't look at their caregivers and say, oh, my parents aren't doing a very good job, or, I'm not getting my needs met. Instead, we are wired for attachment, all human beings. And so instead, they can only really assume that there must be something wrong with them, that they're not getting their needs met. And so they usually store this core interpretation or deep wound of something's wrong with me. And the emotion that usually goes with that is shame. And so anything that touches on shame is extremely painful, because it's sort of reigniting a lot of this pain inside. And so criticism, they tend to just shut down and withdraw so quickly, and it really builds walls, and it really erodes the connection when what you say is coming from a space of seeming shaming. And sometimes we won't even, as human beings, mean to seem shaming. Maybe we'll say, hey, you did this to me, and that's not okay, or but really, unless you're saying, hey, I felt this way when this action was taken, and you may not notice, but this is what it makes me feel, and I would really appreciate if you could be a little more careful in this area. Unless we're expressing from our space of vulnerability, which again takes strength to do, and please watch my video on conflict communication, because it'll sort of outline a little bit more of this. But unless we are moving from a space of vulnerability and courage to do so, it naturally, a dismissive avoidant also perceives any form of even discussing core issues can sort of be taken in through their reality filter, as if it's criticism. It's often perceived and taken in as criticism, and then again, you'll just see this sort of shutting down. Um, Other triggers, lack of security. Because again, think about it. When your physical needs are not met and you don't feel safe in your environment, of course, this is a core trigger as this person moves into their adult lives. So that can be a huge thing. And inconsistency or emotional volatility in relationships. And it's interesting because generally people who are with dismissive avoidance tend to exhibit these core patterns, I've noticed. So usually you try to say, hey, you're hurting me with your actions, but often we will say that in not the most effective way, like, what's wrong with you that you do this? And that's just like huge shaming and criticism for the dismissive avoidant. And then of course the person expressing that feels that their emotional needs are like totally not being heard, which is usually one of the wounds that the person with the dismissive avoidant attachment style type experiences in the relationship. So it's interesting how these things sort of feed one another most of the time. So it's really important to make sure that you're communicating your feelings. Communicate from a feeling space. Hey, I feel hurt when X, Y, and Z. Not, hey, you did this to me the other day and that's not okay. Not anything that seems like it's that blame or pointing of the finger. More the expression rooted in yourself. And then you want to clearly communicate your needs. And here's why. Um, Despite that there are challenges to be with this attachment style, as with other attachment styles as well, everybody has their own challenges. Um, you know, what I've found and very consistently is that dismissive avoidant style individuals are sensitive souls. Like they're really sensitive creatures, and that's why they're so sensitive and shut down to criticism. That's why they take things so quickly and can shut off, because they're protecting their vulnerability. It's so scary for them. And so, you know, we want to be really careful and see this as the expression, see these negative traits that can be judged by people in this relationship with them, seeing them as what they are, which is like this fear and this vulnerability and this gentleness and this deep sensitivity of somebody who really didn't feel supported and like they had their needs met and could emotionally rely on others. And that's really what this attachment style is all about. And what I've found over time, working with couples and all sorts of different individuals, is that dismissive avoidant people really want connection. They just don't believe in it very much. And so when you can come from a space there where you can express your needs really clearly, dismissive avoidant individuals are generally very good at seeing those needs through and wanting to participate and wanting to meet these needs, as long as they are consistently expressed. You're not going to express one need and then the person's going to turn over and they're going to meet that need forever for the rest of your life consistently. You have to see the needs through if you're the person in this relationship with the dismissive avoidant. You want to be saying, hey, remember that when you become dismissive and cold, I feel shut out. And so when you're ready, to warm up again, or, I really want connection from you, or whatever your need is, you want to express it very clearly and consistently and with patience. If you're in this relationship and you care enough about the person that you want to stay, you can make these tweaks and you can move through these things quite easily with a few core rules here. Um, um, Expressing your needs very consistently. Every time you express a need, express how you feel when this need is not met, or when this need feels dismissed or shrugged off or ignored or avoided by accident. Express, hey, I feel hurt. Hey, I feel sad. Hey, I feel, that I don't matter that much to you. I feel, and then follow that up with, and this is what would really make me happy instead, and be as clear and specific as possible. And again, patience, persistence, consistency. And what you'll see is that you'll actually help to sort of heal this attachment style, because they learn that it's safe to give and it's safe to receive. And so you can really shift out of this attachment style, or help this person to shift out of the attachment style. Not that it's anybody's job to save anybody, but just by having clear, clean communication that's consistent over time, and the expression of your feelings from a space of vulnerability. And so the last part that I want to share here is the needs. So usually the needs of a dismissive avoidant person are often warmth. I see these as very consistent parallels. And there will be more than this, of course, but these are sort of the core needs that I find consistently that are, extremely strong for these attachment styles. Warmth, consistency, right? Because imagine, like, when this person was a young individual, consistency was horrifying. Consistency was like, am I going to eat? Am I going to survive? Am I going to be just emotionally rejected for how long? And so consistency is really key, and it really gets that sense of safety. And the more safe this attachment style feels in the relationship, the more they are going to thrive. Um, support is huge. They dismissive avoidants love to feel supported. um, just love to feel like, hey, somebody inquires about their life and says, hey, how's this going? Or, oh, you have this important meeting on Friday. Are you ready for it? How do just that support. Validation for what they do. And the more you positively validate things, like when they meet your needs, things like when they do connect, when they are warm, the more they get excited to do these things, because this is something, imagine you don't get any validation as a kid, and in fact you have more so like emotional neglect. Then when there's validation, it's like, wow, it's this beautiful thing coming from the space of, there was a big void here. So these are really important pieces. And lastly, direct communication is key. A lot of dismissive avoidance, because they don't come from a space where somebody really made their needs feel seen and heard, or their emotions feel seen and heard. It doesn't come naturally for them to see and guess and understand and insightfully detect, what somebody else's needs are. So the more clearly you communicate, then they're like, okay, now I know what to do. But I hear a lot of people who say, like, I want to meet my partner's needs better, but it's really confusing, or it's hard. I don't know, like, how exactly to do it. And so specific direction is key. So keep in mind, this isn't about putting yourself, sometimes there can be pain, as with other attachment styles. This isn't about putting yourself through, you know, things and just putting up with it out of guilt or sadness for this attachment style. This is about being accountable for your needs, for your feelings, expressing them directly, clearly, specifically, and moving from that space, and also understanding where these behaviors are coming from so that you're not personalizing them, and then helping this, digging into this with this person also as a means and strategy to equally get your needs met. So the more you collectively open up dialogue to understand and move back and forth with these things, now now things can be open and shifted and changed in a really positive direction for both parties. So again, just to be clear, this isn't about self-sacrifice. This isn't about, justifying behaviors that are not fair or right, that don't make you feel good consistently over time. But this is about understanding taking the place of conflict in the majority of situations you can find unnecessary conflict is occurring, and about really moving through this with this individual, and opening up yourself in that process too, which is a really beautiful opportunity that you have. Because usually, again, the attachment style types that tend to be with dismissive avoidance are usually quite awful at clearly understanding their emotional state, sharing it, thinking that it's worthy of being shared or heard, and communicating their needs clearly and specifically, or even knowing what their needs are. So this is your healing as well if this is you and you find yourself struggling with these things. So again, this is just a short summary. I could go on for quite some time about this, but I wanted to just do this quick overview of like what you should know and understand, what the triggers are, what the needs are, and then what you can do to also make sure that you're getting into a healthy space and not being sort of burdened by any of the pain that can come out of these challenging situations. So I hope this was useful. If you've got a lot of value out of this video, please connect with us. Please like this video, share it, subscribe to our channel, and feel free to visit for any cool tools, worksheets, resources, www.personaldevelopmentschool.com. Thank you so much for watching.